The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said to attain knowledge, add things every day, but to attain wisdom, subtract things every day. And I really like that. I think in our busy culture in the Western world, we try to solve problems by adding more projects, more meetings, more emails, more audio books, more podcasts, more YouTube videos. And in this constant trying to solve by doing more, by adding more, by being more, we exhaust ourselves and end up feeling frantic, rushed, and lacking space in our lives. And I think we really need to stop and pause and consider what might be and how might we make progress by doing less, not more. So I want to talk about the wisdom of subtracting and the mindset of subtraction and how we can actually make progress in our lives by slowing down, being thoughtful, and making space. And that's really what wisdom is about. Wisdom is about slowing down, making space, and thinking deeply about what you're learning so that you can apply it and actually make a change in your life, to shift your habits, to shift your mindset, and to actually experience and perceive life as it truly is. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I want to talk a bit about the Western mindset of adding more and solving problems by doing more, and the Asian mindset of subtracting and actually solving problems by doing less. I'm actually half Chinese, half Australian, and so there's a bit of both in me. And I want to share a simple personal story from my childhood about how much we can subtract from our lives before actually experiencing less. So this is a photo of my dad. He's since passed away, but he was born in Shanghai, in China, and then moved to Hong Kong, and eventually came to Australia when he was 17 years old. Met my mum, and here I am. Now, Dad became a dentist in Adelaide and then Sydney, but his great passion in life really was playing Mahjong, which is a Chinese gambling game that he played with his friends, and he just really liked it. He played a lot. And so I remember as a child, a young child, spending a lot of time in Chinese clubs, surrounded by Chinese people playing Mahjong and not quite understanding what the game was about. The thing is, I only spoke English. My sister and I didn't speak Cantonese. And so we didn't understand the language of all the people around us. And so we had to make our own fun. And there weren't many toys. There wasn't much kind of space to run around in where we were playing, but we had a lot of Mahjong sets. And so my sister and I learned to be creative with how you can actually use these blocks of tiles to have fun. So we used to create dominoes, Mahjong style, as you can see in this video. But the game we spent most of our time on was what we called Chinese pyramids, which is essentially Chinese Jenga using Mahjong blocks. We would build these massive pyramids, sometimes with 3 or 4 different groups of Mahjong blocks. And then the game was to push out certain blocks one at a time to see how many blocks you could take away from the structure before it fell down. The person with the most blocks won the game, just like in Jenga. Jenga is an interesting idea because essentially the fun of the game is it's a game of subtraction. The game is essentially to remove as many blocks from the pyramid as possible before the structure falls down. And so I want to talk about how that might look in practice and what it might look like to take some things out of your life to actually make progress, to attain wisdom rather than just knowledge. So here's the thing. In the Western world, so Australia, America, New Zealand, the UK, we are really told that the way to make progress is to add more. Add more, do more, be more. I think it's the background of a consumptive culture, and that's just how we solve problems. But the Eastern culture, the Chinese culture, can actually be quite different, and I find that fascinating. I read a book by a behavioral scientist from America called Lao Tzu, and he wrote a book called Subtract. And the basic premise of this research was that in the Western world, we tend to solve problems by adding, but in the Eastern world, they actually often solve problems by removing or subtracting or eliminating, and we could learn a lot from that mindset. So let's give an example from art. One study started by this researcher went around and asked a bunch of people in the Western world, give me an example of an unformed piece of art. And when asked in, let's say, America or Australia or Western countries, most people give a similar answer: a blank canvas. That's our imagination of art. We start with nothing and then we add something in order to create a beautiful piece of art. But interestingly, when people are asked the same question in Japan or China or parts of Southeast Asia, they often give a different answer. Rather than describe an unformed piece of art being a blank canvas, they describe a rock that hasn't yet been chiseled to become a statue. which I find fascinating because if you think about it, the mindset's very different. Because a statue is formed by removing and eliminating and subtracting the debris in order to create the artwork that's hidden already within. And I think that's such a profound analogy for what it might look like for us to live our lives by making space and slowing down and removing the clutter, rather than trying to always solve our problems by adding more. And this reminds me of Michelangelo, the famous Italian Renaissance artist who was obviously in the West, but he famously said, "I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set him free." So I suppose I'd like to ask you, what might it look like for you to eliminate and remove from your life, to take some blocks out of your life in work, maybe in your family, in your team, in your digital consumption, in order to actually make progress? Ask yourself the question, what can I subtract? So before I give you some really practical examples about how you can take this principle and actually make space in your life, let me just point you in the direction of a really helpful resource that's free. It's my How to Say No for a Greater Yes ebook and audiobook. You can get it at spacemakers.au/no. I'll give you a really simple, practical framework called the Reset Framework to help you redefine your story, to consider the emotions related when you try to say no and set boundaries on your time, and also the tactics required to help you say no like a pro and actually make a bit more space in your life. So if you're interested, that's at spacemakers.au/no. The audiobook takes about an hour to listen to in the car. Hopefully you enjoy it. But let me give you some really practical ideas about how you can take this mindset of less, not more, and actually make space in different areas of your life. In fact, sometimes the only way to make progress is to remove in order to say yes to something greater. But let me give you some quick examples of how you might make space in work and life by doing less. At work, maybe you want to cancel that meeting or that recurring meeting to make a bit more space in your week. What if you were to pause or slow down that side project, or even say, okay, I'm going to put it aside in order to focus on the projects that really matter? What if you were to delegate a task and delegate more work instead of micromanaging or controlling stuff? Delete notifications, remove email alerts, turn off those Teams alerts and actually make some space in your life at work. And maybe keep a not to do list, a list of all the things that you would like not to do in order to actually focus on the things that you really care about. There are so many examples of how you might do this at work. In the realm of life, the mindset still really works. How can you actually make space in your wardrobe by having fewer clothes? How might you make space in your digital life by unfollowing content? Not mine, hopefully, but deleting social media accounts or removing the amount of kind of subscriptions you have. There's so many ways you can make space by uncluttering your digital life, and it can make a huge difference without taking too much away. Could you choose fewer hobbies? You know, I've seen people who just take one hobby on and then the next and then the next, and they end up filling their house with all these toys, but they don't actually get to do much in terms of their hobbies. So what if you were to actually choose fewer hobbies, just one or two, and actually master them? Learn the guitar really well, become a great surfer, go bushwalking regularly, but don't do it all at the same time. Declutter your life and increase the quality of your hobbies. And the final example is in the relational world. You know, how can you invest more deeply in a few real life, in-person relationships rather than having 1,000 friends that you connect with online, where you feel like you actually have to keep up the job of communicating with everyone that you hardly spend time with and never actually have time to spend time with those you really care about? It's all about making progress, attaining wisdom, not knowledge, by slowing down, removing some blocks from your life in order to increase the quality of your work and the quality of your life in order to make a bit more space. Next time you have a problem to solve or an opportunity to take up, next time you're thinking about the strategy of your team or how you'll approach your family problems and actually enrich your lives, maybe ask the question, can I make progress by doing less? Where might I remove things in order to gain things? How might I take things away in order to attain knowledge? How might I live a less busy, richer, and more full life by making some space? Hey, look, this whole channel is something that I hope is a gift to you. It takes lots of time, but it would be super helpful if you would subscribe. That's a way of supporting me. It's really the best way to support me and to leave a comment. But until next time, make space.